This video is made possible by donations to the United States Lighthouse Society from people like you.
Hi, I'm Ralph Krugler with the United States Lighthouse Society, and today we're talking lighthouses and animals. So who better to chat with than Elinor DeWire, who wrote the book, The Lightkeeper's Menagerie, Stories on Animals at Lighthouses. Hi, Elinor.
Hello.
Nice to meet you finally.
Yes, we've traded emails, we've traded Messenger and all of that.
Yes, we
So
have. And you sent me a wonderful assortment of photographs, which I took and broke into three categories, which I call native to the area, service, and pets. So I'd like to break those down into those three areas. So let's start off with native to the area. What are your favorites?
oh gosh, I had a long conversation by phone with Ted Paterson up in Alaska, and he was a great talker. He's gone now, unfortunately, but we did get a lot of material recorded about him and his time because he was I guess you'd say an Alaska native. He hunted, he tamed animals, he did a lot of things. And bear were very important to him, not only as a food source for the lighthouse, because they couldn't always get a delivery of supplies, but he used the bear skins. He was like a native Aleut, he would use every part of an animal. And he was a crack shot, but he was also wonderful at describing the world around the lighthouses where he served, particularly Cape St. Elias, which was just at the end of the world, if you ask me. And there was volcanoes around him, and he described the beautiful flora and fauna. And gosh, my phone bill was pretty big. This was way back in the 80s when I first wanted material on light keepers. Yeah, so Ted's my favorite, I think, but it's hard to choose. It's like, who's your favorite grandchild? You love them all.
So, one of the photos you sent me was about a flock of birds.
Well, it was a bittersweet story about birds. I mean, sometimes they were pets. Certainly, bird watching was great if you were a keeper who liked that. There were some keepers, I believe there was one at Slip Point in Washington, who um, captured the birds, sadly uh, killed them, and then stuffed them. He had a huge collection in the attic of stuffed birds that he had done the taxidermy for at Slip Point. But more difficult, I think, was birds hitting the lantern. I had a talk with um, bird watching authority years ago, and he told me that he used to go over to England to St. Catherine's Lighthouse to watch the birds during the great migrations in the fall and spring. There would just be thousands of them and murmuration of them, going up and down in the sky. And they would land on the lighthouse to rest before they continued on. And he got to see a lot of birds. Same thing in New England. The Great Atlantic Flyway goes up through there, and if you're wanting to look at birds, that's a place to go. But sadly, they get confused. Why would there be a very bright light in the nighttime sky? They knew what the moon looked like, I'm sure, and birds, we believe, navigate by the Earth's magnetic field is their guide. And then they're flying along and they see this huge bright light. They get confused. Maybe they get angry. Who knows? And birds have been known to attack lighthouses. Hog Island Lighthouse in the Chesapeake Bay one night had thousands of them literally attacking the lantern. And then sometimes they just slam into it by accident. But it's very costly. Big birds um, brants and bigger birds can break the glass and actually slam into the lens, and that's extremely costly. So the stories are pretty, they're fun, and then they're sad, and then sometimes they're just murderous, bloody, nasty.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something better. Let's talk about Charlie.
Charlie the seal. Yes. There was a Loran station there in Los Angeles. There were Coast Guard guys stationed out on this lighthouse, Los Angeles Harbor Lighthouse. And you might as well have been a million miles away when you were out there on the end of a breakwater because, you just, and the worst part was you could smell the Sunday barbecue. You could hear people, you could see them splashing and having fun at the beach. It was terrible to have these temptations and be stuck. Well, they noticed this little seal, a pup actually, who had gotten separated from his mother, but he was old enough to eat adult food, and he was hanging around the lighthouse, and the guys would go out and fish, and there he was, and they thought, well, he thinks we're his mother. so, so they started feeding him, and they tamed him, and Charlie posed for a number of Coast Guard publicity photos, and he was very sweet. I mean, who doesn't love a cute little seal? Absolutely. So that's Charlie's story.
Okay, let's move on to Pete and Mrs. Pete.
Oh, the foxes, the wild foxes. Yes. Um, William Tinsley, I think he's gone now, but I knew him through some of the lighthouse community, the lighthouse fanciers. And he was a fancier because he had been a lightkeeper up in Alaska at Cape St. Elias, which I have previously mentioned was very remote and lonely. He and his wife were there for a short time, and wives were generally forbidden at those very remote lighthouses. But she was there for a time because she remembered the foxes too. They saw them, and like a lot of people, I do this too. I feed the deer, I feed the raccoons. They started feeding these little foxes, and oh my gosh, they were the sweetest looking little animals. But um, Will Tinsley said their eyes were so wild, and if you look at the pictures he took of them, yeah, they look like little pet doggies, but their eyes, there's a wildness there that. Yeah. So I guess they came for a year or so to be fed, and then they disappeared. So it was a little bit of a bright spot in the Tinsley tenure at Cape St. Elias.
You sent a picture of Plum Island with a pigeon.
I never got the pigeon's name, but Barbara Keyser is the person who gave us that photo, and she said I believe it was her grandparents had tamed this pigeon, and he didn't come in the house or the lighthouse, but he would come to the property, and they would go out and they'd feed him from their hands. I assume it was a him. I don't know how to tell pigeons apart. They would feed him from their hands, and he allowed them to touch him, to pet him. And this kind of stuff just tells me how lonely lighthouse life could be. We look at Plum Island today and we think, well, look at all the neighbors around. Well, they weren't there years ago. It was just a lighthouse, and it was a long walk to get back to town. And so a companion, a pet, just made it a little easier to bear if you were way, way out there. We see that often. And we see animals that were not only service animals, uh, watch animals, but pets too, because they were almost like people.
Yes, they were. Okay, we're going to move on to probably my favorite story. It's one that starts at Cape Canaveral and moves to my favorite lighthouse, Hillsborough Inlet. And it's
Right?
talking about Joe the alligator.
Oh, yes, Joe. Joe. Uh, can't remember the name of the family.
Stone.
Stone?
Yeah.
Yes, Stone family. Yeah, their kids found uh, this alligator in an old sinkhole pit, I guess, down at Cape Canaveral. And the alligator was, he was going to die if they didn't get him out of this hole because, you know, alligators are great at swimming and they can run pretty fast, but climbing, not so much. So the kids got him out. I have no idea how they did it. Probably ropes and things. They probably tied a rope around his mouth because he was wild. They got him out and he became a pet. And he was better known when the family got to Hillsboro. And somebody in the family, one of the Stones, told me they had a station wagon. Was this the 1930s, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that they didn't know how to get Joe up to Hillsboro. So I don't know if this is true or not, but they said they strapped him onto the roof of the station wagon.
Yeah.
No.
So the story I got from the Descendants is just a little bit different. I was told that it was actually Annie, Ben Stone's wife, who was going to I can't remember the town, but she was driving along a sand road and saw it in there, and she went back and pleaded with Ben and Floyd Quarterman, the head keeper, to go out and rescue him. When they said they did, and they actually brought it back home, much to her surprise. And the kids kind of fell in love with him. And then when he got the promotion to go to Hillsboro to take over as keeper, he was on the back, not on the roof, but they had a trailer. They actually tied him to the trailer and drove him to Canaveral on that. And I always loved thinking about, imagine driving down what's now US Highway 1, going to these little towns, and there's an alligator strapped to the back of this
Right.
trailer.
What were people saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when they
Yeah.
got to Hillsboro, Ben actually made him a whole little enclosure with running
Yeah.
water, and he became quite the local celebrity.
Yes. Yes. I love that picture of Ben at the fence and Joe was looking up at him lovingly. And somebody told me his favorite food was chicken wings. I
Yep.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Well, wherever you live, there's things around you, and Florida's got lots of reptiles.
And it's funny
Joe
'cause
the alligator.